1. So at my job, they offer fundraising cards which have 20 coupons that give free items, and on the card it says that you can only use one at a time. However, the franchise owner allows us to accept 2 coupons at once, based on he's a nice guy. I had just gotten to work, and within 5 minutes, a lady drives up and steps out of a $100,000 Audi. She had ordered over the phone, and my coworker was new, so he told her to bring in her coupons and we would adjust the price, but he told her that she could only use 2 coupons at a time. She comes to the counter and says she is here to pick up for, let's say, Mandy. I pull her food out of the hotbox oven, and then she hands me 3 fundraiser coupons for a free medium pizza when you purchase a large pizza, a free garlic bread, and a free cinnamon bread. I then explain that we can only take 2 at a time, and if she wanted it, she would have to pay full price. Or I could remove it from her order and then trash it. She immediately becomes defensive, blaming it on the 15-year-old coworker that took her order, that he needs to be punished. I then again explain that I can just take the bread off and it would be no problem. She starts examining the coupons, which are very little tear-offs from the large fundraiser card, which explain the coupon policy even more conservative than I was willing to allow. She starts to proclaim that because the individual tabs don't say the coupon policy, that it is ridiculous that I am making this up. I ask her if she has the larger card, and of course she says no. After seeing that I am not willing to back down, I can't, as the owner can see my price adjustments and will see I took 3. She tells me to void the order, and I oblige with no sarcasm or rudeness. I never take any of these people and their insults personal. I tell her have a good day, and then she starts yelling that she didn't mean that I should void the whole order. Yes, she did, and she thought I wouldn't throw away her food. She starts insulting me, but by then I explain that she won't be getting any food from this location. She asks me if I am the manager and that she wants my personal cell phone number to send to corporate. Wanting to be done with the situation and knowing corporate is even more conservative, I write down my name and phone number and tell her to have a good day. She refused to leave, but then started calling my phone, which is in my pocket. I have an Apple Watch, so I can see that she is calling as my wrist is vibrating. After about 5 calls, I respectfully remind her that she asked for my phone number and showed her my phone watch ringing and her cell phone number across the screen. She gives me a sarcastic smile and ignores what I say. Knowing that she's being a dumb cunt, I just go back to sweeping the front half of the restaurant, and she just continues to call my phone, leaving me messages about how rude I am being. I go to the bathroom, and she somehow had got my coworker's attention, the 15-year-old, and starts interrogating him about why he would lie to her on the phone, and that we are the rudest people she has ever dealt with. I come up to the front and tell him to stop answering her questions and that she needs to leave. She then starts screaming at the top of her lungs, "You're lying and dishonest!" But then tells me to shut up and that she is talking after continually telling her to leave in a respectful tone. She keeps repeating that I am a liar and that she's going to get me fired. I finally have to tell her that I am going to call the police if she doesn't leave, and she then screams, "Do it!" over and over. By this time, about 20 minutes have passed and other customers are asking her to just leave. She then threatens my job again and walks out and drives to another location that just happens to have the owner working. She obviously lied to him, and he calls me to see what happened with her in the background, as I can hear her dumb voice. I explain everything, and he then turns to her and says, "Actually, ma'am, I'm only going to be able to let you use one of those coupons per the fundraiser card, and I have one right here to show you the policy." Still on the phone at the time, I hear a loud shriek from her that sounds like someone was being devoured by the swamp monster, followed by the owner telling her to get the fuck out of his store. Edit. Yes, guys, I understand that I shouldn't have given my number out, but it was a heat-of-the-moment mistake and I wanted her to GTFO as soon as possible. I don't intend to do anything devious with her number as, like I mentioned in the post, I don't take any of what customers do personally. 2. This happened a few years ago, out in the deserts of Arizona. Just to paint a little picture, I am a young hotshot corporal in the Marine Corps. I have the bulldog mentality and I'm all about malicious compliance. We just convoyed out to Yuma, Arizona, from the beautiful 29 Palms, California. If you've ever been to 29 Palms, you know this is not true. We take our entire battalion, some 900 guys, from one desert to another more inhospitable desert for 3 weeks in the middle of August. We're sleeping outside under cami nets and are using outdoor facilities the whole time. Loads of fun. One morning we're all getting up, pretty slowly I might add. There was a late-night training event the night before and we were all done with. Not to mention, as soon as the sun looks over the mountains, it's easily 100 degrees outside. So we're hot, tired, and generally pissy. We have a Master Sergeant, who we'll just call Master Sergeant. That's a little out there. Dude has been in for a minute, and was just an all-around weird guy. I liked him and disliked him at the same time. Or as a saying we use a lot in the Corps, I like him as a person, but not as a Marine. So anyway, he's walking around kicking people's racks, telling them to get up and whatnot, even though days prior we had set up a night watch, and this was the same time those guys were supposed to be sleeping. Plus it was the coolest and they needed rest. So of course I opened my mouth and said something, Master Sergeant? Why are you waking them up? They're supposed to be asleep.
Excuse me, Corporal. You're right, why am I waking them up? You should be doing this as an NCO.
Non-commissioned officer. Well, Master Sergeant, the reasoning is, those guys have been awake all night. They're our night watch. You know the guys that you said you wanted to be up on watch in case something went down?
Who do you think you're talking to, Corporal?
This is where I should have watched my bearing, but I wasn't thinking clearly. I have since then chilled out. Master Sergeant, I'm talking to you. We've been having a conversation this whole time. You replied to my question. This was a bad move, especially when others are around to hear and start laughing, so of course I get my ass chewed out. Not a bad chewing, but enough. And as I should have received. After the chewing, I was put on the last fire watch. Fire watch is the term we use to mean late night watch. You have shifts and someone stays awake for a few hours and ensures Marines aren't doing dumb shit, or a fire doesn't start, or to be there to alert someone of an emergency, etc., etc. So boom, this means every morning at 0400 I am up watching everything and waking everyone up at 0530. Cool. Fuck me. Enter malicious compliance. When you're back on base, they have the reveille call every morning at 0800. It's to signify the raising of the flag. They also have a song that goes with it. But as we're out here in the desert, we don't have that. And the way our Caminette Castle is set up, it's right next to everyone else in the battalion. So 5:30 hits on the dot, and I hit the switch that turns on these huge floodlights. I scream reveille as loud as I can 3 times, which this light is right next to Master Sergeant, who's sleeping cozily in his cot. And after screaming reveille, I proceeded to do the whole bugle call by mouth as loud as possible. I'm pretty good at it as well. I have it memorized note for note. I wasn't expecting the reactions from the Marines, as I thought all my buddies were in their cots crying from laughter, and everyone else was just like WTF. Semi-laughing, semi-pissed, and then I look over at Master Sergeant who's just staring at me. So pissed. He never said a word about it to me and told my sergeant to take me off that fire watch after 3rd day. I guess he didn't like being woke up like that. 3. Not me, but my best friend at the time, but I was involved. Heavily. I wish I wasn't. My friend will be A, I will be referred to as Tony, and the teacher will be Ms. T. This was in year 1, when we were around 5 or 6. The way our school worked is probably different than in other or American schools. We had one teacher that would do almost all subjects throughout all the years, usually not with music or French. This meant that our main teacher would also do phys ed. They usually didn't participate, but was there to make sure we were playing, behaving, and to keep a score. If we were playing a sport, that would keep track of a score. All students would get changed for PE in the classroom, from our school uniform to our school PE kit, until year 6, where all the guys got changed in the hall while the girls changed in the classroom, for obvious reasons. Anyways, we were all finished changing, and I just sat on the floor minding my own business, until my friend A suddenly pointed behind me and went, "Ew." I looked behind me and there was a shit on the floor, and the students and teacher were further away opposite to me, Conversation with teacher went something like this. Was that you who did that, Tony? No. Who was it then? I don't know. Don't lie, Tony. I swear it wasn't me. This goes on for quite some time. Eventually I gave up, because what was the point? She wasn't going to believe me, and I don't know who did it. So I didn't know what else to do. Arguing the truth wasn't getting anywhere, so I gave in. Fine, I did do it. Go to the bathroom and clean yourself up. Wipe my butt, if that was too vague. Fine. I went to the bathroom, but a teacher didn't come with me. I would like to mention that I have autism, and I don't know if it was me being awkward in general or if it was just a result of my autism. There was a wet floor sign in the way of the bathroom door. A normal person would have moved the wet floor sign or at least step over it, but I just sat there, contemplating whether or not I should move the wet floor sign and risk getting in trouble. I've got into trouble for petty things before, one being for yelling at another student for throwing sand in my eyes, and I didn't. I just went outside and played whatever sport we were playing. What was the teacher gonna do, pull down my shorts to see if there was shit there? Besides, I didn't even need to wipe my butt because I didn't do it. Sorry that this is a bit long, but here's what happened. Apparently my friend A asked the teacher to go to the bathroom. She said no, which was common, as we were only allowed to go to the bathroom at break, dinner, or if it was an emergency. Well, since it was desperate enough for him to be discomforted, but not enough to be an emergency, he did the most reasonable course of action, shit on the floor, and blame his best friend and never tell him the truth. He never did tell me the truth. One day in year 7, 6 years later, I was remembering all the things that happened in primary school, that incident being one of them. It all made sense. He was sitting no less than a foot away from me as well. I confronted him about it, and he thought it was funny. I didn't. I was fuming. I do find it funny now. I haven't talked to him much in secondary school. He's always been getting into trouble, so I never see him. Kinda miss him, though. He did often tell lies, so it was like him to do that. And that's the story of the solving of a 6-year shit mystery finally solved. 4. I work at a small marketing firm. A couple weeks ago, we completed a migration of all of our file server data to our MSPs, that's Managed Services Provider for the uninitiated, i.e. a cloud host for all your data and applications, so you don't have to buy and maintain your own servers. Remote desktop environment, and I was making sure everyone had all their files from their local PCs copied out there as well, so they could access them within the RD environment. All was going exceptionally well until I got to the last person on my list, who we'll call Jay for now. I had intentionally left Jay for last, because she was notorious for having all of her work files on her PC. I am talking files from 5+ years ago related to clients we haven't done business with in over 3 years. This is after already having had one of her company laptops stolen a few years ago and losing all her data, which she then blamed me for not having backed up anywhere. At that time, I was not in a position to do much about it, as I was only a help desk tech then. However, I'm now the IT director, and basically when it comes to technology, what I say goes. Jay was not only getting migrated to the new environment, but she was also getting a new laptop at the same time because she's murder on laptops. She's a salesperson who goes through at least one laptop every year. So she came down to my office to get her new laptop, and she was talking to me about this migration and how she wasn't sure it was going to work and all this. She starts asking me about how she's going to access all her stuff, and I told her we were moving all her stuff to the server. She looked at me like she was ready to punch me in the face. I'm not doing that. I need my files on my PC. What if I'm on the road and I have no internet? Well, I understand that, but I'm going to put the files on the server. This is company policy, and if the files aren't on the server, I can't ensure they'll be backed up properly. If you know you're going to be on the road somewhere with lackluster internet, copy the files you need down to your PC temporarily, and put them back on the server when you get back to the office. Well, I don't want my files moved. Can I just keep them where they are? Keep them on your PC, where you won't be able to access them from within the RD, where all our applications exist now. Okay then. I don't want to put your 47 gigabytes of worthless files on the server anyway, so I didn't. Then I explained to her how to get her files outside of the new RD environment, knowing full well she wouldn't understand the first thing about any of this, because she's hard enough time turning her PC on. Literally, one of her complaints after coming back from vacation last week was that the power button on her new laptop is too hard to press to turn on. I then sent an email to my boss and her boss, telling them what I'd done, and how she'd fought me every step of the way on this migration process. 2 hours after I got off work, I get a text from her boss, who happens to be the president and part owner of the company.
I know you're off right now, but if you get a chance, can you help Jay out? She's having issues.
I told him I wasn't home. I was at my brother-in-law's house, and I would be home in a couple of hours and could work with her then. Meanwhile, she'd been emailing me to complain about how she couldn't get any work done because none of her files were accessible from the server, and she'd needed me to copy them over. Not just the files she needed right then, but all of them, because I need everything at all times because I never know what I'll actually need and when. So I just have to have it all or it's worthless. I ran a last accessed date report out of PowerShell and found that about 95% of these files hadn't been touched since something like 2016. And because I didn't copy them before, nothing was working right and she couldn't get any work done. Well, I was busy that night, so I didn't get home till about 3 hours after that text from her boss. And by then she'd shut her computer off, so I couldn't do anything for her anyway. She then had to spend the next 3 days on the road without her precious files, which she actually had on her PC, but she couldn't figure out how to swap between environments to copy them over herself when she needed them, which only ended up putting her further behind and getting her in trouble with her boss for being behind in her work as well as disobeying company policy. 5. This was back when I worked as a complaint manager. Me and my co-workers answered people's complaints. Me is me, obviously. TL is team leader, direct supervisor. MGMT is management. So the story goes like this. One day I walk into the office, start the coffee machine, turn on my PC, all that stuff. I go get my coffee and do my usual morning email reading. I notice a mail from my TL telling me there's a meeting in 2 minutes in another room. Fuck. I grab my coffee and head for the meeting room. As I enter the meeting room, everyone on my team is already there, as well as my TL and a guy that's below management but above my TL, let's call him Joe. He asks if everyone is here, and my TL confirms.
So, as you may or may not be aware, TL's team is not quite measuring up. Management wants you each to step up your game to get more complaints done, answered, each day.
TL responds, how much more? The current target is 12 per 8 hours. That leaves 40 minutes for each complaint. 40 minutes isn't a whole lot to read, understand, investigate, solve any problems along the way, type an answer, and send it to the customer.
I understand you guys, but management is comparing your results to the other cities' results. All of their agents manage at least 16 per day. Their median is 18, so the new target is 18.
Is this a joke?
I'm afraid not.
And what if we don't deliver?
Management says that whoever can't deliver will be thanked for their work so far, but the company is always moving forward and needs people who can keep up with the tempo.
So what should we do? We can't hire more people, management won't allow it. And our programs keep crashing. We had a 6-hour downtime on our main program yesterday.
Management said they don't want to hear excuses, they need results.
Fine, understood. Quick note, I've never seen my team leader back away from something like that. He always stood up for us, even if it meant his own ass was on the line. But we can't manage 18, not even remotely.
Like I said,
you heard the man, OP. They want results. TL winks at me. Okay.
By the way, they also want you to do things by the procedure, no more shortcuts.
Fine. We go back to our office where TL declares we're having a second meeting to discuss this privately as a team. People start asking stuff like, what the fuck are they thinking? Do I need to pack up now or in a week? Or how in the fuck's name do they expect us to do that, etc.? MC starts here. Enough whining. You heard the messenger of the gods, they want results. A co-worker pipes up. How the fuck are we gonna do that? TL smirks and says, "Simple. From this moment onwards, you have full freedom to do as you please, as long as you reach the daily target of 18. I'll grant each of you access to all the applications, tech, finance, call recordings, administrative account access. You'll have full access to whatever you needed to ask other people to do." But the procedure calls for sending a request to a group, and then doing it and closing the request, after which we continue with our work. You are completely right, OP. But the procedure doesn't state that you mustn't have access to those applications. It also doesn't say that you can't make the changes needed and close the request yourself. Everyone begins to understand his plan. But even with that, I doubt we can top the other cities' results. After all, they are notorious for not reading the complaint and not following through with what they did and promised in the answer. They have so many repeated complaints. We barely get 1 or 2 per week. They get dozens. Did management say they care about repeated complaints? They don't care about quality, only about quantity. So we'll give them what they want. If needed, don't even read the complaint. Just reach that 18 per day, whatever it takes. And that is a direct order. What followed was the easiest few weeks of work ever. We gave management exactly what they wanted, more stuff done. And the procedure followed to a T. Around a month after that, we get a mail flagged as urgent from a woman in management. Let's call her Intolerable Bitch, or UB. That she wants to see us in the meeting room right away. We gather up and go to the meeting room. "What is this?" Pointing at some charts, yelling at TL. "Exactly what you asked for. I don't see a day where any agent has done less than 18. UB gets so red that I thought she was gonna collapse, and continues with the screaming. "No, they didn't, but look at your repeated complaints." "What do you mean? We have 10% less than the other city." "Yes, but it's more than 300% higher than it used to be." "Well, we are processing as much complaints per day, per agent as the other city, with 10% less repeated complaints. I'd call our team a roaring success."
"That's not what we asked for."
"Joe, can you please put UB's email about our team on the projector?"
"Sure thing, TL."
Of course, her mail says nothing about the repeated complaints. "That's the email you sent to Joe. Pardon us, but we did exactly what you wanted us to."
"Well, your team needs to keep the repeated complaints down so the statistic works out."
"Sure thing. Restore our old target and we'll deliver that."
"But we need the complaints answered."
"We've been doing that for the last month or so."
"And the repeated complaint rate needs to be lower too."
"No problem. Hire about 10 more people and we'll let you know if it's enough, or we need more."
"The company can't afford to waste money on office workers. We need to invest."
"Oh, so that's the case. How about someone from management comes to our team and helps us out? I'm sure that you're all skilled enough to perform as well as 2 or 3 people in the same time." Right now you have 3 options. First option is keeping the repeated complaint rate low. But if you keep the quality high, the quantity will be lower. So we need our old target back. Second option is us pulling the new target, but gaining quantity. You will lose quality, so don't bother us with the repeated complaint rate. The third option is to get more manpower so we can access more at the same quality, but it's going to cost more. There is no other option. I respect that it is a difficult decision to make, so you can discuss it with other members of management and let me and my team know how to proceed. Until then, we are getting back to work. We continued to hammer away at 18 a day until I left the company for a better paid and less requiring job. I never heard from UB. Maybe she let them know after I left. 6. A bit of backstory. I worked as a relatively young new manager of a small business. There were about 4 managers who all reported to the owner. We had about 20 staff members, and I regularly was in charge of 5 or 6 staff members at a time. Now for the MC. My shift was due to run for 9 hours on this day, and the employee handbook, as well as the national award, stated that this shift required a 1-hour lunch break. There is also a specific subsection where it stipulates that if you are required to remain on call during your lunch break, then you would be paid for the entire hour. When I approached the owner about this, I was told that I could just eat some sandwiches in the staff room, cramped dark storage room, and just go help out if anyone needed me. I argued that this would mean I was on call and therefore should be paid for the work. He was having none of it. and claimed that if I needed to nip out to buy some lunch then, of course, that would be fine as I wasn't on call. Here is where the MC comes in. If I'm not on call during my break, then I sure as hell wasn't going to hang out in the storage closet for an hour. So I made sure that on the day of the MC I had some of my senior staff members working with me. I explained that I needed to leave the store for an hour for a lunch break, and I picked a nice quiet day, and made sure that the staff had my personal cell phone number in case something went wrong. I was only 5 minutes down the road and made sure I could be there if urgent, but for this to work I had to be off camera and away from the center for a full hour. I then proceeded to head down to a local lunch bar, read the paper and just enjoy the peace and quiet for exactly the amount of that time I had for my break. I ran my watch timer as I left the store to ensure complete compliance of the 1 hour break. It took 3 shifts for the owner to realize I was doing this, and when he did find out, all hell broke loose. I was told something along the lines of, "What if something had happened? The junior staff don't have the experience to deal with major situations. What if someone held us up at gunpoint while you were away?" Every situation he brought up highlighted the fact that I needed to be there at all times, to which I calmly responded that I was on break. And I then repeated his claim that I was not on call and could leave the store to go get lunch if I wanted to. He started to realize what was happening and asked me not to do it again until he had a chat with the relevant people. The next week he had a meeting with me explaining that it was wrong for him to ask me to stay in the center on call without pay, and that from now on, all managers will be paid for their breaks. It's been 4 years now and managers have come and gone, but all of them have since been paid for their breaks. I feel like I made a positive change for the employees, and I'm proud that I made the effort to show him that we needed to be on call. Thanks for listening to my story. 7. I have asthma, always have. Now there are varying degrees of asthma. The worst is considered having asthmaticus. Essentially this means the following. Number 1, I would have an asthma attack 2 or more times a year. Number 2, these attacks would result in hospital stays at a young age. Number 3, I was provided a nebulizer to use at home, and I also had one which stayed in the nurse's office. Now since my youth I have grown to the point where my asthma is more controlled, and with proper meds, I seldom wheeze now or have an episode. Thankfully my last full-blown asthma attack was over a year ago, and only stirs when I'm ill with upper respiratory issues. Think the flu, colds, etc. When you grow up with asthma, as you have probably read in the other posts, you know when an episode is coming on. You know when it is getting worse, and you know when it is time to say, "Fuck it, I don't want to die, nebulizer time." I didn't have many issues with teachers growing up. My mom was on the PTA and was known throughout the schools I attended and was very much a helicopter parent. I didn't even think there could be issues with taking my meds until I was in my early 20s and working at a collections call center. We had a team leader we will refer to as EB, entitled Bitch. EB had a propensity to tell you what you were doing and experiencing, and if you didn't do what she would do, how she would do it, then you were clearly doing it wrong. She was a micromanager like no other, and she and I'm extremely stubborn when it comes to being micromanaged, had a few altercations. To put things in context, here are a few things we clashed on in the course of the first year I was there. Number 1. We were allowed personal items to entertain ourselves while we worked. EB had the nerve and gumption to think that she was allowed and had the power to snatch anything she wanted and place it in her drawer. Like we were 5. I had a red stress ball I would juggle while working. One day, while tossing it up not too high and catching it, she thought it would be a good idea to snatch it mid-air and walk it to her desk. I placed the call on hold, walked down the aisle, opened her drawer and took it back. I then took a picture frame from her desk and took it back to mine. She didn't have much of a leg to stand on when we spoke to the floor's VP later on. I got to keep my stuff. Number 2, she would walk up to you mid-conversation and start talking behind you, leading what you were saying. The worst part of this is that the person on the phone could hear it. While most would comment on it, one day I decided to shift the entire convo with said person over to the fact of how rudely she was behind me. I basically sat down, turned my chair to face her, and remarked to the person on the phone how, "Yes, it is rude to interrupt our conversation. Why, yes, we do have a good rapport. No, I would never ask you to pay that much up front. That would be asinine based on what you have told me you are going through financially. Once again, she backed down. Now it was later in the year, and I ended up catching what turned out to be the flu. Most of the office did this year, but although I tried to work through it, I called in one morning while having an asthma attack. Now, I don't know about everyone else with asthma, but this is how an asthma attack works for me. It's not that you cannot breathe in, you can't breathe out. It takes a ton of focus and effort to push the air in your lungs out, so you can inhale a full breath of air. This is worsened by the fact that your airway is being constricted by your overactive bronchial tubes, and made even worse when you are already lightheaded, and a coughing fit can lead you to dang near passing out. What it sounds like. Imagine having just run until you can't breathe anymore, now add a cough that won't let you inhale all the way. That's how you sound on the phone. I left a message on the call-in line and took another treatment. The attack started after work the previous day, so I had been up mostly all night taking treatments every 4 hours. I was exhausted, ill, and short-fused. This is when EB decided to contact me and inform me that she didn't see my asthma as that debilitating, and I needed to be in the office within 10 minutes as she knew how close I lived. Now, arguing while having an asthma attack is terrible, and try as I may, she just kept cutting me off. Happy that she could get a word in edgewise with me unable to really talk back, as she put it. So I capitulated. I got up, put on whatever was close by, and slowly made my way to work. It took longer than the 10 minutes allotted, but I had to pack my meds and nebulizer. And I didn't pack my new compact one. No. I packed my boy Blue. As I said earlier, I have had asthma since I was born, so I have multiple nebulizers and good old Blue is the oldest. This 10-pound beige block of plastic is a 1-foot cube, with the loudest air pump in it that I owned. Not only was it loud, but it shook like a $400 women's magic wand. Old Blue was a marvel of late 1970s, early 1980s nebulizer engineering. However, in the mid-2000s it was a massive, gigantic noise-making vibration machine that had no place anywhere near an office. I walked in looking like death. Walking past EB with her shit-eating grin and sat down at my desk like a good boy. As you can imagine, the first 2 hours on the phone were god-awful. I could barely reply to anything, and spend much of the time at my desk checking my fever, taking meds, and waiting. 'Cause I had my ace. Right before the 4-hour mark, when I could no longer afford to wait, I broke out Old Blue. I had it in a duffel bag I sometimes carry to work. All of the people next to me just stared while I set up this Goliath of a machine. Filled in my meds, put the mouthpiece in my mouth, and hit start on a double treatment. Imagine being at your desk. Imagine being right near closing that big commission-making deal when this starts. And this is quiet. Old Blue shook the pens off my desk, and one on the other side of the wall it was touching. Everyone within earshot had to hit mute. I essentially stopped 2 or 3 teams of 40 people from being able to work. Not only did the teams hear it, EB heard it, and so did the VP. EB walked over and tried to ask me to turn it off, but I just stared at her. See, you shouldn't talk whilst taking your treatment. That is a waste. Waste not, want not. Suffice to say, it didn't take the VP more than 5 minutes to say I could go home, but I had to finish my treatment or I wouldn't be able to drive home. So there I sat, mid-call center floor, on Old Blue for the next 20 minutes. I was able to breathe a little better, thanked the VP, and went on home for the next 3 days. My attacks have always lasted 3 days of suck, and 1 day of recovery. When I got back to work, the VP apologized for EB's behavior. He informed me she had been reprimanded and forced to take a sensitivity class, and a managerial course. Also, I had been bumped up to another team with a more chill manager. We will call AM for Awesome Manager. EB never spoke to me again, but no one ever questioned whether or not I was sick again either. All MC with no hospital. Win-win. 8. So this took place almost 20 years ago now, my first real IT job. I worked in application support and was a senior analyst. To set the scene, The help desk managed a large estate, and the help desk was broken down into 4 sections. Each section managed a different customer estate, and due to the new shift patterns, a lack of staff, we had just recruited a whole bunch of new analysts, fresh recruits, who knew nothing about our bespoke systems, software, etc. Each section has a monitor showing report faults that need to be fixed, and if they are in and out of SLA, simple color code. Red means bad, it's out of SLA. Orange, almost bad, it's going to be out of SLA. Green was all good, it's within SLA. The idea was to help you prioritize the faults that needed fixing, and to keep within service level agreements of 95% fix within SLA. Each section had a manager who worked 9 to 5, most of them client-facing, so client service manager, and some had little IT knowledge or skill. I had just started work at 7:30 AM, having had the previous day off because prior to that, I had worked 3 nights because 1 day off helped you adjust. So I had got to work, grabbed a coffee, scanned through the faults, and had seen 1 out of SLA the night shift had left. A quick check on the fault logging system scanning through the history, I knew this job would take a couple of hours, but I could dial into the site, execute commands and rebuild their database, drop out and then periodically log back in to check on progress. The pain would be to ensure no data was lost, financial data. There was an additional problem in that the software in use was a very old version and shouldn't have been supported anymore. Only 2 analysts had bothered to learn it, because there was only a few customers left with it. Hence it had been left. The night shift knew I was on, and I was one of the 2. The rest of the faults would not require as much time but could be dealt with easily, simple stuff, printers breaking, hardware not working, etc. Some basic software faults which would be fixed with restarts. Turn it off and on again. And then some others would require a few simple commands to be executed. So I dialed in, checked what I thought would be the problem, confirmed my guess, started backing up, dropped the connection, and then started on other faults. I was sat in a semicircle of 5 rigs working fast. I knew the new analysts would start at 8:30. Sure enough, in they marched. I was asked to take 2 of them and start training. Easiest way to do that is with active sites and active faults. That way I kill 2 birds with 1 stone, clearing the backlog and doing training at the same time. They're both nice lads and we hit it off. And they are learning as we go. I start them on a rig each, explaining how we connect to sites, commands, passwords we use, and then how to do initial investigation, what to look for, yada yada. At 9ish, the manager for the section I was on came in, walked past the desk, stopped, pointed at the screen and said, "What is that red? Fix it!" Then marched off. About half an hour later he walks back through the help desk, sees the phones are a little manic, sees me dialing into sites individually, whilst also helping the 2 new guys, and still not having said good morning, raised his voice and says, "I told you to fix that, why haven't you?" My response was lost to the nethers of time, but whatever I said was not good enough, and he stormed off. He returned with the department manager, and she, a lovely lady, takes 1 look at me, what I am doing, listens to the voices around her and can see it's a busy day. She asks me why the fault is out of SLA. I explain that it would require time. Due to the nature of the fault, the night shift hadn't had the knowledge, and I had already started work on it. However, other priorities had come in that needed my attention, whilst I was also training the newbies. It was going to be one of those days. She knew it, I knew it, the manager, let's call him Arshat, didn't. She nodded, thanked me, and they left. About 2 hours later, at the point I have not had a break, but my new assistants, new analysts, had been good and had been supplying me with coffee. I worked with them, and we had cleared through a large number of faults, not helped by a system update failing. I had already dialed into the site once, checked what was happening, happy with progress. I knew I would be working on it through lunchtime. It would be about 12 hours out of SLA by the time I fixed it, but there would be no data loss, and at this point, there was not much that could be done. In walks Arshat. His face went the same color as the fault color. He was spitting tacks, he threw a wobbly, followed closely by the toys from his pram. Leaning closer, he told me to fix the effing fault and to stop effing about and do my effing job. I replied, losing my patience somewhat, And I told him I am doing my job, why doesn't he go find a large object and himself with it? It was at this point the room went silent. He went purple and stormed off. Now my team leader came up and asked what was going on. I explained to her the problem, what I had done, was doing. She could see I was managing everything, and if she could have, would have allocated another analyst to the desk to help me. She leaves telling me she has my back. But just to moderate it somewhat. A few minutes later, RSAT walks in with department head. I get taken into her office. He lodges a complaint against me personally, and he's ranting. At this point, I turn to her, department head, and say, it's been manic. I've already started working on it. It's lunchtime soon, and what would you have me do, just work in that one fault and nothing else? Before she could respond, he said something along the lines of, effing hell, now he gets it. So I look at him. Say, you want me to do nothing but that one thing? Yes. Are you sure? Yes, just fix the effing fault. Don't do anything else. Don't effing talk to people. Just fix the effing fault. I said fine, and had a little tantrum of my own. I was young, and left saying I'll do just that. And went back to the desk, said I'm sorry boys, I can't do any more training. I have to fix the fault. I put my phone in Do Not Disturb. I told the call center I had been allocated to just one fault reference, and nothing else could come to me. I told my team leader I made sure it all looked like I was doing the one fault. Okay, I would still help the newbies, telling them what questions to ask, helping them to diagnose faults, but at a much slower rate. I dialed into the site, I checked the status, and I sat and watched, occasionally moving the mouse, because that always helps the screen refresh faster on dial-up or ISDN, and did nothing else. I made sure each and every database was free of corruption. I made sure that site was fixed and working. I took lunch as well. And back then I rarely took lunch, but that day I did, right after I fixed the fault. I took lunch just after 2 p.m. When I returned, I had just over an hour before the next shift came in, and when they did, they had over 40 faults out of SLA, because apart from me, who else would fix them? The 2 new analysts? That site, if the RSAT had bothered to check, was a priority 3. Not because of the fault, but because the site was shut down for a day. The ones that I left mostly 1s and 2s. The next day I was pulled into a meeting by my department head, with my team leader and with RSAT. He was upset over the state I left the desk. Department head reminded him that is what he insisted I do despite her advice and my advice. His stats had been messed up, he was defensive. It wasn't his fault. We should have allocated more resources, yada yada. I left after 5 minutes, leaving my team leader in with them. She came out smiling and patted me on the head, saying, good boy. RSAT rarely spoke to me after that, preferring to email, and he left a few months later. 9. We owned an auto repair shop for years. Until the mid-2000s, it was rare for a customer to provide their own parts for basic repairs. But then people discovered online shopping. Most of the time we explained they were not saving much money. And we wouldn't warranty the part, which meant if it failed, the customer was going to have to pay the labor to have us remove, so they could return the part and get a new one for us to reinstall. Whereas if we provided the part, we would warranty it. Most of the times the savings were minimal, and not worth chancing it. But on occasion the price difference was significant, and that's where the headache started. A customer brought her car in because it was overheating. We diagnosed it, and quoted her about $500 for the repairs. New T-stat, radiator, and hose. Hers was badly cracked, and while it didn't leak, it was going to at some point soon. Plus labor and coolant. $250 of that was for her radiator. She okayed the job. Then the husband calls and says hell no. He sees a radiator online for $129, and we are fucking him over. Lucky Me takes the call. I ask where he sees said radiator, and he tells me shitparts.com. I don't remember the site. So I look it up and see it's a universal radiator, meaning it can be used in several models of whatever brand of car it was. But for each model you had to do something like punching out hole A or B, snipping a tab off, etc. In other words, you had to alter it to make it fit, and by altering it, you voided the warranty. I also explained a radiator is under pressure and by having different holes to punch out, made it inherently weaker. He argued that because I'm a woman I have no idea what I'm talking about, and I just want to charge him higher prices so I made more money to spend at the mall. Now I was used to the "you have boobs, you can't know cars" mindset, and it really didn't bother me, but saying I wanted money to go to the mall crossed the line. I hate fucking mall shopping. It was like he knew that would piss me off. So I told him to just come and get the car. We were not going to work on his shit and hung up. My husband was standing next to me laughing and was surprised that's all I said. He was completely on board with not doing the job and always backed me up if I refused to take a job. We were always busy and didn't need to deal with people who were assholes. His kryptonite was crying women, and sure enough the wife comes in crying that she really wants us to do the work. My husband caves and says okay and explains that we shouldn't order the radiator from shitparts.com. She understands and agrees to use ours. Once again her husband gets pissed, but instead of calling, he comes into the shop. He refuses to talk to me, so I get my husband. He explains the same thing I told him, and the guy still insists on ordering the radiator from shitparts.com. We cave and say okie dokie. Malicious compliance sets in, and we make him sign a waiver that explains why the part may fail, why it won't be warranted, and that we will charge him remove and replace labor if we have to replace it. His wife is without her car for a week while we wait for the radiator, and I'm sure you can guess it failed. It didn't even last a week before the other hole blew out. They pay to have the car towed back to the shop. I call and ask if they want to have me get a new one, and just get a refund from shitparts.com, or if they want to exchange theirs. Nope. Husband insists on exchanging theirs. They pay to have faulty radiator pulled, pay to ship it back. Wife is without a car for another 2 weeks, when Shitparts says they won't warranty the radiator because it's been altered. Wife finally has enough and tells us to ignore her husband and just fix the car. He never comes back, but she remained a loyal customer, and after they get divorced a couple years later, she told me that radiator ended up being $129 plus $59 shipping and $90 to ship it back, $175 to have her car towed, $200 for a rental car while they waited for the first one, and $325 for the second rental until she said fuck it, plus the credit card fees. The best part was, in their divorce, she used all of that, along with the $500 to do the job the second time to show how financially irresponsible he was, and had saddled them with debts they could have avoided, so the judge made him responsible for all their credit card debt. 10. I do the admin side for a company that maintains ships down at a dockyard in Sydney. When I first started, I was placed with the waterfront engineers, a pack of wild characters who spent most of the day working on the ship, and the rest getting up to mischief. They were set up in a side office far enough away from the main building that meant the higher-ups didn't drop by, so they could pretend the guys were with another company if they got up to any shenanigans. I wasn't sure how I'd go fitting in. I'd just left a retail job peddling supernatural romance to tweens. The first week, the waterfront manager called an official section meeting, which the guys said was weird. They weren't sure what it was about, a few were worried. Manager looked grim. He held up an empty box of Maltesers.
I found this in the bin. This is a family-sized box. But whoever did this didn't share 'em. This is how the machine breaks down.
Turns out upper management said he wasn't holding enough meetings in his section, so he held one about snack sharing. Gives you a pretty good idea of the vibe. Radio was always on, strictly dirty overalls dress code. We had pie day, Fridays. Someone brought in a pie oven, then later a hot dog oven with bun warmers. Lot of jokes, lot of laughs. I shadowed the guys on the ship, got my overalls dirty, and pretended to know what a propeller does. Good times. Section manager let me know one of my duties was to record minutes for the most boring meeting ever. I recorded on this mini digital recorder thing they discontinued due to war crimes against ears. It barely picked up a voice speaking directly over it. So listening back, you crank up the volume and you're concentrating, trying to decipher the mumbles. Then it picks up a sneeze across town, pumps it full of decibels, and boom. nuclear explosion in your ear holes. So once a fortnight, I record the most boring meeting ever, plug my headphones in, and listen back to the most boring meeting ever all over again in surround sound and type it up. A 2-hour meeting, packed full of action items, acronyms, non sequiturs, and tangential bullshit. Takes me about the same time to listen, decipher, and type up into something resembling the minutes of a productive meeting. When I had the headphones on, the guys in the office left me to it, even cutting me out of this super fun game where you throw a foam ball at someone's face when they least expect it. Anyway, short story long, the ship sailed, project finished up, and I got moved to another section with the engineers. These are the guys that Waterfront were always complaining about, as they were sending through design changes for Waterfront to implement, but rarely visited the ship, so their designs often caused a lot of problems when installation was underway. Their overalls were very clean. Vibe was less foam ball to the face, more bunch of librarians ready to shush you in the face. There was a no headphones policy up there, even though they had killer internet and no blocks on the complete Hillsong catalog webpage. Kidding, psych carriage all the way. Being an open plan office, the engineering manager wanted everyone to be accessible, approachable, and tuned in, solving problems directly with people, contractors sitting around you, rather than emails, meetings, office hunting, etc. Weirdly, they were trying to achieve what Waterfront had figured out, where it was free and easy and contractors were dropping in there to solve problems all the time, and you put your headphones on to get work done and tune out. The engineers up here were cliquey and standoffish, and I couldn't break through the ice. A lot of internal beefs too. So it was Tension City, where the Waterfront guys made me feel welcome. These guys made gals like me feel like I'd invaded Poland. Now I'm no Mr. Personality. Those people who can turn the vibe of a room around. I'm more like Mr. Sea Sponge, who soaks up the toxic environment and slowly decays into a crusty, colorless bleh. Within a week, I just kind of switched off, punched in and punched out. This section was so dreary and mind-meltingly dull. Just keyboards, typing, and small talk. I was thinking about quitting, and I'd only been with the company a few months. So I'm still doing the meeting minutes, which take even longer now because my will to live has leached from my body. I have my headphones in. I've moved the audio file onto the computer so I can turn up the volume and scrub around easier. I'm concentrating hard on one of the longer, more boring meetings. Someone is talking about paint specs for a rudder. Someone else is in the background droning on about a quarterly report. And someone has a cough that almost knocks me out of my chair every few minutes. This is when I notice Big Boss from head office is standing off to my side, leaning against an engineer's desk. And they're both grinning in my direction. Now, he's not a bad dude, but he's one of those bosses that have that weird knockabout one of the boys swagger, that wears a suit and only talks to other people in suits, and occasionally comes down to tour through the peasants and sits on the edge of a desk and makes whack jokes and expects a laugh and then slaps his knee and says, "All right, I'm off." And then he leaves the room and everyone sighs with relief. Anyways, they're having a good laugh. The boss is making that old-school gesture like back in the day, where you'd loll your head to the side, cross your eyes a little, hang your tongue out like a dog and go, "Durr." That one. So I take the headphones off and rub my ears a bit. Because I've been listening to the meeting recording at full blast, and when he says something but I don't really hear it. "Sorry, what's that?" I say.
Mate, the music no good.
He taps his skull where headphones would go.
We want you to be aware of what's going on around here.
I nod, yeah, okay. But he kind of looks at the engineer and they both grin and the boss makes this, "What's with this clown?" kind of expression. I'm sitting there with the headphones around my neck thinking, Jesus, did he just do that right in front of me? Not behind my back like you're supposed to in a professional environment? I don't know, something about that expression really got to me. Maybe it was the vibe of the place already bringing me down. Maybe because a few of the engineers kind of went along with it and I was not their biggest fan. I was like, damn. Do they all think I'm a, insert insult here from your playground days that you think of when you see that gesture, but that's terrible and no one says that anymore, and you feel bad for saying that when you were a kid? It rhymes with... doesn't really rhyme with anything. Maz? Baz? Vaz? You get the idea. Am I a... insert insult again? So the boss goes back into the manager's office to chat about running over neighborhood dogs or whatever. And I look down at the audio file and I'm only halfway through the minutes. Which it's my job to do by the end of the day, so I pull the headphone jack out of the socket, bump up the volume a little bit and hit play. For the next 5 minutes or so, no one says anything. I can feel the heat of a few engineers staring daggers in my back. A few heads pop up over cubicles. My laptop is absolutely blaring the boring meeting. Just one distorted, droning voice waffling on, followed by another, then another. Sneezes, coughs, meandering, boring point after point. I'm scrubbing back, playing, scrubbing back, playing. The voices are chopped up like a demented DJ set. It's goddamn awful. The meeting has a lot of people in it, so there's voices there that come in distant from across the room. I scrub back, turn it up even further to hear what they said, then play it over a few times. I casually type it up and move on. Only an hour or so to go. I'm playing back this one mumbler lady's snippet over and over, and I'm turning it up each time. But she's so distant from the mic, it's just getting more and more distorted.
The WVM for the TA is in process.
Every time the acronym sounds different, and I just can't get it. The PWM for the PCA is in process. Little louder. The CWM for the TPA is in process. Little louder. The CWN for the PPA is in process. I turn the volume to max. Back up the player and hit play. Before she even talks, the thing is hissing at teenagers with a portable Bluetooth player on the train late at night levels. Just that nails on a chalkboard white noise static. When she speaks, it sounds like she's yelling through a megaphone.
The PWM for the PTA is in process.
Ah, I nod. Very good, got it. I'm turning down the volume and letting it play to the next part, and it's still super loud when this dude clears his throat right over the mic. And it sounds like a Tyrannosaurus just stubbed its toe in the engineering section. I don't know why someone still hasn't said anything at this point, but I'm past the point of caring. I'm already thinking about going back to my old job at the bookstore. I hear the manager's office door open and the boss pokes his head over the cubicle. You can tell he's trying to think of how to tell me to put my fucking headphones on without actually telling me to do that and looking like a chump.
Mate, can you turn it down a bit?
Yeah, sorry, I'm just having trouble hearing some of the people in the back. I knock it down a few notches. At this point he could have said go ahead with the headphones or whatever, but he didn't. So I kept on. He went back in the manager's office. I did a couple of volume blowouts, just making sure you could hear it in the manager's office. He left a few minutes later. Soon as he was gone, I dropped it down again and threw my headphones back on. I should say I went back to headphones for the engineer's sake, but that would be a lie. Anyways, I'm sure I sounded like a super petty dirtbag with no future. But we can't all be Mr. Perfect Pants all the time. About a month later, another project got stood up, and I left that section to go back with the waterfront guys. In hindsight, when I asked for the transfer, the engineering manager was as keen for me to go back there as I was. Literally just realized that. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Revenge's Ice Cream Archives, Episode 10. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories. I can barely talk today. I had 3 fillings done yesterday, and to be honest with you, it wasn't the worst dental experience I've ever had. It was fine, straightforward, the person knows what they're doing. It's just I'm feeling a bit today, because I had 3 done at once. Although I wouldn't have wanted it done any other way, just get them all done at once and then move on. So yeah, I feel a little bit ouchy. Not as bad as I could be, though. I'm sure I'll be fine tomorrow. Possibly. Just in time for me to do my usual Saturday night gaming stream. I did get myself some medicinal snacks. Donuts, under the excuse that, well, they're soft, it's not too difficult to chew. It's actually not majorly difficult to chew right now. I'm just being cautious. New fillings and all. Anyway, that's enough grumbling for me. I'm going to head off for now. I will see you next week. Possibly. Most likely. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourself.